My son called exactly when the financial advisor slid the paperwork across the mahogany desk. $380,000, every cent I had ever saved, was seconds away from becoming his down payment. Then came his voice, casual and breezy. We moved states. He laughed. Forgot to tell you. He thought he was just updating his address. He had no idea he was signing the death warrant for his inheritance. My name is Evelyn Hart, and at 63 years old, I was sitting in the over-air-conditioned office of Desert Horizon Capital in Sunvale, New Mexico, about to sign away the rest of my life. The leather chair beneath me squeaked as I shifted my weight, trying to find comfort where there was none. Across the desk, Mr. Ramirez, a young financial advisor with a tie that was slightly too wide, was finalizing the paperwork. This was it. The sale of the house Thomas and I had built was complete. The proceeds, along with my entire retirement savings totaling $380,000, were queued up in a digital pipeline, ready to flow straight into my son's bank account for his new house. My phone buzzed against the mahogany surface of the desk. The screen lit up with the name Lucas. My heart did that foolish little leap it always does. I thought he was calling to check on me. I thought he was calling to say thank you. Or maybe just to hear my voice before the big transfer went through. Mr. Ramirez looked up and gave a polite nod, signaling that I should take it while the printer whirred in the corner. I swiped the screen. Lucas, honey? I am just at the mom. Hey. He cut me off. His voice was fast, breathless, and laced with a casual chuckle that made my stomach turn. Listen, we just crossed the state line into Maple Ridge. We forgot to tell you. We moved. Truck's already here. Just wanted to let you know since we are unloading now. The air left the room. Maple Ridge was 2 states away. It was a 12-hour drive. I gripped the phone tighter. You moved. Today, Lucas. I didn't even know you were packing. I could have Sophie watch that lamp, I heard him yell away from the receiver. And then his voice came back to me, dismissive and light. Yeah, it was a sudden thing. Great opportunity. Anyway, we are swamped. Who is that? A female voice drifted through the speaker, faint and irritated. It's my mom, Lucas said to her. Tell her I am busy unpacking boxes. I can't talk right now. Sophie's voice floated back, sharp as shattered glass. She did not ask how I was. She did not say hello. She just wanted me off the line. I sat frozen. They had packed up their entire lives, rented a truck, and driven hundreds of miles without a single word to me. No goodbye. No request for help with the grandkids. No invitation to come see the new place. So, look, Mom, Lucas continued, his tone shifting into that slippery, faux concerned register I knew too well. Don't bother coming out here to help. Okay, it is a long drive and we can manage. Regarding the transfer, just send it through. We are going to use it to clear out some credit card debt first and then put the deposit down on a place later. I will send you a picture when we are settled. He said it as if my life savings were nothing more than a Venmo reimbursement for a pizza. You will send a picture, I repeated, my voice hollow. Yeah, gotta go. Mum, love you. Bye. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. The silence in the office was deafening. Mr. Ramirez was back at the desk, sliding a thick stack of documents toward me. On top lay the authorization form, the bold numbers staring up at me, $380,000. In my mind, I saw the Thanksgiving dinners where Sophie claimed their apartment was too small for me to join. I saw the times Lucas only called when his car broke down or when tuition was due. I had excused it all. I had told myself they were just busy, just young, just building their lives. But they had moved states and forgot to tell me. Mr. Ramirez uncapped a heavy, expensive-looking pen and placed it on the paper. Ms. Hart, we just need your signature right here at the bottom, and the funds will be in your son's account by tomorrow morning. I looked at the pen. I looked at the check. I looked at the empty black screen of my phone. The humiliation washed over me, hot and prickly, followed immediately by a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I was not a mother to them. I was an ATM that had outlived its usefulness. I reached out and took the pen. Mr. Ramirez smiled encouragingly. I hovered the tip over the signature line. The ink was ready to flow. My retirement, my security, my late husband's legacy. All for a son who could not spare 5 minutes to say goodbye. I capped the pen with a decisive click. Mr. Ramirez blinked. Is something wrong? Ms. Hart. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sterile office air. I need to see that again, I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. Actually, stop the transfer. Do not send it. Ms. Hart. He looked confused. The penalty for cancelling the sale of your house is I did not say cancel the sale. I said, standing up and smoothing down my skirt. I said stop the transfer to my son. Put the money in a holding account. I need to rethink my portfolio. I walked out of Desert Horizon Capital and into the blinding New Mexico sun. The heat hit me, but I felt cold. It was the chill of a woman who had finally realized she was alone. But as I walked to my old sedan, a new feeling began to rise beneath the grief. It was not sadness. It was the awakening of a spine I thought I had lost. They forgot to tell me they moved. Fine. I would make sure they never forgot me again. The drive back to my small bungalow in Orchard Hill felt longer than usual. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine and the radio I had forgotten to turn on. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and for a moment, I was not 63 years old anymore. I was 30, driving home from a 12-hour night shift at Pinecrest General, smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, trying to stay awake long enough to get Lucas to school. For 35 years, I had worked the emergency room floor. I had cleaned blood off tiles, held the hands of dying strangers, and swallowed my own grief after Thomas died in that car accident, leaving me a widow with a 10-year-old boy. I did it all for Lucas. I remembered the Christmas Eve when Lucas was 14. He wanted those expensive basketball sneakers that all the popular kids wore. I picked up a double shift, missing our traditional morning cocoa, just to make sure that box was under the tree. I remembered eating peanut butter sandwiches in my car during breaks at the private clinic where I took a second job, saving every dollar so I could send his rent checks during college. I sent the checks early, every single month. In return, I would get a text message 3 days later. Got it. Busy studying. Mom, do not worry. I pulled into my driveway, the engine cutting out with a shudder. I sat there, staring at the garage door. The memories shifted to his wedding. Sophie wanted a destination wedding, something elegant and expensive, to help with the costs. I had quietly sold the diamond from my engagement ring, the last piece of Thomas I truly had, and replaced it with a cubic zirconia. I handed them the check with a smile. And how did Sophie introduce me to her high society friends? "This is Evelyn," she had said, her arm draped loosely around my shoulder, holding a champagne flute. "She is a nurse at a little hospital back in Sunvale. It is so humble, isn't it? They had laughed. I had laughed too, desperate not to be the difficult mother-in-law. I got out of the car and walked into my empty house. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of tap water. The image of that Thanksgiving 3 years ago flashed in my mind. I had driven 4 hours to their luxury apartment in the city, the back of my car filled with the aroma of my roasted turkey. It was Thomas's secret recipe, the one Lucas used to beg for. When I arrived, lugging the heavy pan up the stairs because the elevator was broken, Sophie greeted me at the door in a silk dress that cost more than my monthly pension. "Oh, Evelyn," she had said, looking at the turkey as if it were a roadkill. We actually ordered a full organic spread from a private chef this year. It is all farm to table. But thank you. Maybe we can put that in the fridge for. Later, my turkey spent the evening cooling on the counter, pushed behind a stack of dirty plates, while we ate flavourless organic kale. Lucas did not say a word. He just poured wine for his wife's friends and talked about market trends. I walked to my small home office and booted up my ancient desktop computer. The fan whirred loudly, struggling to come to life. I logged into my bank account. The balance was still there, $380,000. It was safe. But then I clicked on the Transaction History tab and scrolled back. 5 years ago, $15,000 for Lucas's student loan payoff. 4 years ago, $8,000 for repairs on his Audi. 3 years ago, $20,000 transferred to Heartline Loft and Design, Sophie's startup that she claimed she built from scratch. I remembered a dinner party where Lucas had wrapped his arm around me, slightly tipsy. "Mom here," he had announced to his colleagues, "is strictly old school. She keeps cash under the mattress. We have to teach her about modern finance." Right. Everyone had chuckled. I had felt a flash of shame then, thinking I was indeed unsophisticated. Now, looking at the screen, I realized the truth. They did not mock me because I was clueless. They mocked me because I was useful. I scrolled down to the most recent pending transaction, the one I had stopped today. If they truly forgot to tell me they moved states, it meant my presence in their lives was negligible. I was not a mother to be consulted or a grandmother to be cherished. I was simply a resource to be mined. I stared at the glowing screen until my eyes burned. The sadness that had weighed on my chest for hours began to harden into something colder, something solid. "You forgot," I whispered to the empty room. "You forgot me." But looking at the ledger of my sacrifices tallied against their indifference, I knew one thing for certain. I was about to give them a lesson in finance they would never forget. The notification arrived at 8:45 in the morning, blinking innocuously on my screen. Because I had halted the massive transfer the day before, Desert Horizon Capital's automated system had triggered a secondary asset verification. The email was polite but confusing. It flagged an undisclosed liability attached to my social security number at a bank called Frontier Federal. I frowned, my coffee cup hovering halfway to my mouth. I did not have liabilities. I had paid off the mortgage on the bungalow 10 years ago. I carried 0 credit card debt. Then a memory surfaced, hazy but sharp around the edges. 4 years ago. Lucas had met me outside the hospital after a double shift. He had been frantic but smiling, waving a folder about a high-yield savings account that required a co-signer to unlock a special interest rate. I was exhausted, my feet throbbing, and I had signed where he pointed, trusting him to handle the details. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I grabbed my purse and drove straight to the Sunvale branch of Frontier Federal. The interior was quiet, smelling of carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I sat across from a customer service representative, a young woman who typed rapidly. "I need to see everything connected to my name," I said, my voice flat. She printed a stack of papers and slid them across the desk. "Here is the statement for your line of credit, Ms. Hart. It looks like you are close to the limit of $80,000. The room seemed to tilt. $80,000. "Yes, ma'am. Opened 4 years ago." I looked at the transaction history. It was not a savings account. It was a revolving line of credit. The withdrawals were systematic, occurring every month like a ticking clock. And the beneficiary for nearly every transfer was the same Heartline loft and design. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sophie's company. The business she boasted about at every family gathering, telling everyone she built it from grit and 2 bare hands. It turned out those hands were reaching directly into my credit score. "May I see the original application?" I asked. The clerk brought it up on her screen. There was my signature at the bottom. It looked like my handwriting, yet it possessed a digital smoothness that my arthritic wrist could never achieve. "The electronic signature process is so convenient," the clerk said with a bright smile. "I see notes here that your son assisted you with the setup. He was very thorough." "And the credit limit increases?" I asked, pointing to a jump from $40,000 to $80,000 last year. "Did I sign for those too?" "You called in for those?" she corrected gently. "For security. We record the authorization calls. Would you like to hear the verification?" I nodded, unable to speak. She clicked a file. A voice filled the small cubicle. It was low, wavering, and slow, a caricature of an elderly woman. "Yes. This is Evelyn," the voice on the recording said, breathless and weak. "I need to expand the business investment for my family. Please approve the increase." It was Lucas. He was mimicking my cadence, pitching his voice down, playing the role of a frail old woman to steal money from his own mother. I closed my eyes. The betrayal was no longer an abstract feeling. It was an audio file. The clerk's smile faded as she watched my reaction. She quietly signaled for a manager. Minutes later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office with Brandy, the branch's risk manager. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She looked at the file, then at me. "Miss Hart, this is a clear case of familial identity theft," Brandy said. Her voice lowered. "The email address used to manage this account is Evelyn Hart, family. Is that you?" "No," I whispered. "I have never seen that address." I thought so. The IP addresses for the login trace back to a location in the next state, and recently to Maple Ridge. Brandy leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. "Here is the reality. This is a felony. If I file a formal fraud report right now, the police will be involved. Warrants will be issued. Your son could face prison time." She let the words hang in the air. "Prison. However," she continued, "because this is family. We often give the victim a window to decide how they want to proceed. You can file charges, or you can try to settle this personally. But from the bank's perspective, that debt is in your name until proven otherwise." I stood up, taking the thick file she had prepared for me. It contained the fake signatures, the history of the stolen $80,000, and the transcripts of Lucas pretending to be me. "Give me a few days," I said. I walked out of Frontier Federal into the blinding noon sun. The file felt heavy in my hands, like a brick. Lucas did not just forget to tell me he moved. He had been systematically stripping the copper wiring out of my life for years to build his wife's empire. I got into my car and tossed the folder onto the passenger seat. It slid open, revealing the fake email address again. Evelyn, Hart, family. He had created a digital ghost of me to approve his theft. I started the engine. I was not going to the police station. Not yet. I had a much more effective court in mind. I needed to get out of the car. But the idea of going back to my empty house felt unbearable. So, I drove 3 blocks down to Morning Crumbs, a small bakery that smelled perpetually of yeast and caramelized sugar. It was my sanctuary, mostly because of Gloria. Gloria was the owner, a woman in her 60s with skin the color of deep mahogany and a laugh that could rattle the windows. She had been my rock since Thomas died. When I walked in, the bell above the door chimed, and Gloria looked up from the espresso machine. She took one look at my face, abandoned the latte she was making, and reached for the tongs to grab a fresh cinnamon roll. "Table 4. Evie?" she commanded. "I will bring the extra frosting." 5 minutes later, I was spilling everything. I told her about the phone call, the move to Maple Ridge, the forgot to tell you excuse. Then I told her about the bank. I told her about the $80,000, the fake email address, and the recording of Lucas pretending to be a senile version of me. I crumbled a piece of the cinnamon roll between my fingers, unable to eat it. The worst part is, I used to brag about him to you, Gloria. Remember I told you he was handling my finances because he wanted to protect my future? I said, "My Lucas is such a good boy." Gloria sat back, wiping her hands on her apron. She did not look shocked. She looked like a woman who had seen this movie before. Years ago, her ex-husband had cleaned out her savings to buy a boat before running off with a dental hygienist. She knew the taste of betrayal. "Honey, look at me," Gloria said, her voice dropping to a serious register. "You are not a mother to them right now. You are an ATM, and you are not even a PIN-protected ATM. You are the kind standing in the corner of a gas station that spits out cash if you kick it hard enough." I flinched. "I don't want to send him to prison, Gloria. I sat there with that risk manager, and all I could think about was him as a little boy in his baseball uniform. I cannot handle the thought of him in a cell. But," I took a shaky breath, "I cannot just let this go. If I do, I am telling him that I am worthless." "Exactly." Gloria nodded. "You do not have to lock him up to teach him a lesson. But you have to understand one thing. People like Lucas and that wife of his, they do not understand love. They understand currency. They only learn the lesson when they lose exactly what they abused." She leaned in, tapping a finger on the table. "Use the paper, Evie. Use the laws. Use the money. They worship it. Fine. Let the money be the whip." I stayed at the cafe for another hour, letting Gloria's words settle in my gut. By the time I drove home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my lawn. The house was quiet. I walked straight to the back room and unlocked the metal filing cabinet I had kept since my nursing days. I pulled out the hanging folders. There was the deed to the house. There were the life insurance policies Thomas had left me. And there was my will. I opened the thick document. It was simple. I, Evelyn Hart, being of sound mind, leave 100% of my estate to my beloved son. Lucas Hart. I stared at the words. Beloved son. I closed the folder with a snap. I went to my computer and opened a browser window. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed financial fraud, family lawyers, Sunvale. Then I typed how to disinherit a child in New Mexico. I read for hours. I read stories of parents left destitute in nursing homes because their children had power of attorney. I read about result-oriented trusts. I read about civil lawsuits versus criminal charges. Finally, one search result caught my eye. Sage and Laurel Legal Group protecting seniors from financial exploitation. It was a small firm, not one of those big corporate sharks on the billboards. Their website said they specialized in family mediation and asset recovery. I looked at the clock. It was 9:30 at night. I filled out the contact form on their website, my heart hammering against my ribs. Reason for inquiry: familial identity theft and estate restructuring. I clicked submit. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark. I turned my head to look at the framed photo of Thomas on the nightstand. He was smiling, holding a fish he had caught on our last vacation. He would have been heartbroken. He would have wanted to fix it, to talk to Lucas, to believe it was a misunderstanding. I am sorry, Tom, I whispered into the darkness. But I cannot afford to be soft anymore. This time, I will not let my heart ruin the rest of my life. If he chooses money over me, I will let him learn his lesson through the only language he speaks. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the phone call, I did not cry. I planned. The conference room at Sage and Laurel Legal Group was small, smelling of lemon polish and old books. Across the table sat Nora Sutton. She was a woman in her 50s, with steel grey hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen too many courtrooms. She had been a prosecutor before she went into private practice, and it showed. She did not offer me tissues. She did not pat my hand. She simply laid out the facts, like a surgeon arranging instruments. If you had not caught him, Evelyn, Nora asked, her voice level and devoid of theatricality, do you think he would have stopped at $80,000? I opened my mouth to defend him, to say that Lucas was just desperate. But the words died in my throat. I looked at the file on the table. No. I admitted softly. No, I don't think he would have. Nora nodded once. Then we need to be clear about what this is. Faking a signature on a bank application is bank fraud. Doing it to a parent is elder financial abuse. Using your identity to secure capital for a business across state lines brings in federal jurisdiction. If we go to the police, Lucas and your daughter-in-law are looking at significant prison time. I shivered. I can't put my son in jail. Nora, he is all I have left of Thomas. I understand, Nora said. But you also cannot let them bleed you dry. So, we are going to take the third road. We are going to use the law to strip them of every advantage they stole, and we are going to make them thank you for it. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. Here is the strategy. We need to regain control of your assets, transfer that $80,000 debt solely to Lucas, and ensure he never touches another dime of your estate. But we need him to agree to it. We need his signature. He will never sign anything that admits guilt, I said, shaking my head. He will, Nora replied with a thin, sharp smile. If he thinks he is getting away with it, we are going to make him an offer he cannot refuse. You are going to send an email. It will look like a peace offering, a mother's apology. I frowned. Apology? For what? For overreacting, Nora said, tapping her pen on the pad. You will tell him you are hurt. Yes, but that you understand young couples need to be independent. You will tell him that you want to give him one last gift to help him start fresh in Maple Ridge. You will offer to wipe the slate clean. She began to sketch out a diagram on the paper. You will tell him you are willing to take care of the confusion at the bank and even send him a small cash gift to help with the move. But because your lawyer is being difficult, he needs to sign a few standard documents to close the file. What documents? I asked. 3 things. Nora listed, counting on her fingers. First, a debt assumption agreement. It legally transfers the $80,000 from your name to his. Second, a waiver of inheritance. By signing this, he agrees to be removed from your will in exchange for the debt relief you are providing now. And third, and this is my favorite part, an assignment of interest for Heartline Loft and Design, Sophie's company. Exactly, Nora said. Since the company was funded with your credit, technically, you are an investor. This document will transfer the equity that was purchased with your money back to you. They will think it is just a formality to clear the audit. And if they refuse, then you drop the hint, Nora said, leaning forward. In the email, you casually mention that the bank's fraud department has been asking questions. You tell him that I, your lawyer, am advising you to file a police report to clear your name. But you, being the loving mother, are trying to keep it a family matter. You are giving him a lifeboat. Evelyn, he will be so terrified of the water that he will jump in without checking for leaks. We spent the next hour drafting the email. Nora was masterful. She knew exactly how to balance the tone, just pathetic enough to sound like the mother they thought they could manipulate, but specific enough to be legally binding. When I walked out of the office, the sun was setting over Sunvale. I held the folder tight against my chest. For 30 years, I had written letters to school principals begging for extensions, letters to scholarship boards, letters to Lucas with smiley faces and hearts. This time, I was going to write a single email. It was not a letter. It was a trap. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the corners of my mouth turn up. Not in joy, but in anticipation. I was taking my life back. The house was silent as a tomb, save for the hum of my refrigerator and the rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the keyboard. It was 2 a.m. I had created a new, secure folder on my desktop titled Resolution, where I saved every PDF Nora had drafted. Now, it was time to bait the hook. I opened my email client and typed Lucas's address, then Sophie's. My hands hovered over the subject line. It needed to be non-threatening, something that would make them roll their eyes rather than panic. I typed, just some arrangements before I get older. I took a breath and began to write. I had to channel the Evelyn they thought they knew the pushover, the enabler, while weaving in the steel mesh Nora had handed me. Dear Lucas and Sophie, I typed. I wanted to apologize for the other day. I think I reacted poorly when you called about the move. Perhaps I am just getting too old and holding on too tight to the way things used to be. It is hard for a mother to let go. I paused, reading the sentence. It was perfect. It fed their ego. It validated their narrative that I was just an emotional burden. I went to the bank today. I continued, shifting the tone slightly. The risk manager at Frontier Federal was very concerned about the credit line and the activity on it. They were using words like identity theft and fraud because of the signatures. But do not worry. I told them you were just being helpful and clumsy, and that you would never hurt me on purpose. That was the first turn of the screw. I was telling him the bank knows, but I am the only thing standing between you and the police. However, I wrote, my lawyer, Ms. Sutton, is much stricter than I am. She advised me to file a police report to clear my name from the debt. I told her I absolutely do not want to see my son or his wife in court or in the newspapers. I want to handle this as a family. I could imagine Lucas reading that line, the blood draining from his face at the mention of courts and newspapers. So, to make sure everyone is safe and has a fresh start in Maple Ridge, I have asked Ms. Sutton to draw up some simple agreements. I am willing to clean up this mess and even send you a small gift of $5,000 to help with the moving costs. In exchange, I need you to sign the attached documents to formally move the $80,000 debt into your name, so the bank stops investigating me. I attached the files. Nora had named them innocuously Moving Support Agreement and Family Financial Restructuring. Inside those PDFs lay the legal bear traps, the admission of debt, the waiver of inheritance, and the surrender of Sophie's company equity. Please sign these electronically by tomorrow noon, I added. I want to put this behind us before the bank's fraud department escalates it automatically. P.S. I have blind copied my lawyer on this email just so she knows I am not doing anything foolish and that we are handling this like adults. I sat back. The email was a masterpiece of passive aggression and legal maneuvering. It offered them a way out, but the door led straight into a cage. Before I clicked send, my eyes drifted to the framed photograph on my desk. It was Lucas at 10 years old, grinning, his arms wrapped around his father's neck on a grassy field. He looked so innocent then. He looked like a boy who would never steal his mother's identity. If you choose the decent path, I whispered to the photo, my voice cracking in the empty room, then this email is just a safety net. But if you are who I think you have become, then this is the end. I moved the cursor to the send button. There was no dramatic music. There was no thunderclap. Just a soft, digital whoosh sound as the message vanished from my screen and flew across the country to Maple Ridge. I sat there in the dark, staring at the sent folder. For the first time in 30 years, I was not wondering if my son was okay. I was wondering if he was smart enough to realize he had just lost. The silence in the house felt different now. It was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a hunter waiting for the trap to snap shut. Less than 40 minutes after I hit send, my phone began to spasm on the table. It buzzed, silenced, and buzzed again immediately. Text messages stacked up on the notification screen like debris from a crash. Mum, what is this call me? Who is Nora Sutton? Mum, pick up. I watched the screen for a moment, sipping my tea. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, contrasting sharply with the electronic panic unfolding in my hand. I let it ring 3 times before I finally slid my thumb across the glass. Hello, Lucas, I said. Mom. Oh my God, are you crazy? His voice was high and thin, stripping away the casual indifference of yesterday's call. I just got this email. What are you doing talking to a lawyer and calling the fraud department? Do you have any idea what you are doing? I am cleaning up a mess. Lucas, I said, my voice steady. The bank found irregularities. They flagged the signatures. I didn't forge anything, he shouted. Then his voice cracked, dropping to a frantic whisper. I helped you fill out the forms because you are not good with computers. Remember, you asked me to help. I remember signing a paper for a savings account. I corrected him. I do not remember opening an $80,000 line of credit for Sophie's design firm. The line went quiet for a second, save for his heavy breathing. Mom? Please, he stammered. You cannot let them involve the police. It was a misunderstanding. We meant to tell you. But then the business got tight, and we figured we would pay it back before you noticed. You cannot send your only son to jail. You wouldn't. I am not the one sending you to jail, I said, reciting the lines Nora and I had practiced. The bank is required to report fraud. If you sign the documents I sent, it becomes a private debt transfer. If you do not, then the bank deals with my lawyer. It's not me. It's the market. Lucas pivoted, his tone shifting from fear to blame. Sophie. She needed the capital to scale up. We were doing this for us, for the family. We were going to pay you back with interest. We were going to buy you a condo right near us in Maple Ridge once the company took off. We just needed time. I listened to him. And suddenly, the pattern became blindingly clear. In every version of his future, I was the one waiting. I was waiting for him to graduate, waiting for him to call, waiting for the business to succeed so I could be repaid with my own stolen money. I am done waiting. Lucas? I cut him off. I am 63 years old. I do not have enough years left to be the collateral for your gambling. If you do this, if you make us sign this admission, Sophie loses her business credit rating. I could lose my license if I have a fraud judgment. We will be ruined. That was the risk you took when you signed my name, I said, feeling a cold resolve settle over me. I am offering you the life raft. It is up to you to get in. Put me on FaceTime, he demanded. A moment later, his face filled my screen. He looked ragged, standing in a room full of half-opened moving boxes. Then, Sophie squeezed into the frame. Her eyes were red, but I noticed there were no actual tears on her cheeks. Evelyn, Sophie said, her voice trembling with a curated fragility. We are so sorry. We just wanted to give your grandkids a better life. Listen, we read the documents. We will sign the debt assumption. We will pay the $80,000, but the inheritance waiver and the equity transfer, is that really necessary? Can't we just sign the debt part and leave the rest for later? She was bargaining, even with the police breathing down their necks. She was calculating how much of my future estate she could keep. It is not a negotiation. Sophie, I said, those documents are a package deal. It is a firewall. I am protecting the rest of my life from you. But it's unfair, Sophie snapped, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second. You are stripping us of everything. I am taking back what is mine, I replied. You have 1 hour left before my lawyer files the police report. Lucas grabbed the phone back, his face contorted in a way I had never seen before. It was ugly. It was the face of a stranger. You are destroying this family, he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. You are blowing up our lives over some numbers on a screen. I hope you are happy. Mom, you are choosing money over your own blood. The old Evelyn would have crumbled. The old Evelyn would have apologized and shredded the documents just to make him stop looking at her with such hate. But the old Evelyn had died the moment he said he forgot to tell me he moved. No. Lucas, I said softly, I am not destroying the family. I am finally taking care of the only family I have left to be responsible for. Myself. I hung up. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I looked tired, yes, but for the first time in years, I did not look like a victim. 3 days later, we convened in the digital sphere to formally dismantle the financial entanglement that had choked my family. I sat in Nora's conference room in Sunvale, the air conditioning humming a low, steady note. On the large monitor mounted to the wall, a split screen displayed the players in this tragedy. On the left was a woman from Civic Notary Online, a remote notary with a neutral expression and a headset. On the right, sitting on a folding chair in their chaotic, box-filled apartment in Maple Ridge, were Lucas and Sophie. The picture quality was crisp enough that I could see the dark circles under Sophie's eyes and the way Lucas kept wringing his hands. "Mr. Hart, before you apply your electronic signature," Nora said, her voice projecting clearly toward the microphone, "I need you to verbally confirm for the record that you understand the document titled Debt Assumption and Release of Claims." Lucas looked at the camera, then flickered his eyes toward me. I did not blink. I understand," Lucas said, his voice tinny through the speakers. "Please state specifically what you are agreeing to regarding the Frontier Federal line of credit." Nora pressed. She was not leaving any room for future ambiguity. Lucas swallowed hard. "I acknowledge that I used my mother's identity to open the line of credit without her express permission. I agree that the balance of $80,000 is my sole responsibility and will be transferred to my name. And regarding the estate Nora asked, I voluntarily waive my right to any inheritance from the estate of Evelyn Hart, in exchange for her covering the immediate transfer costs and forbearing legal action regarding the fraud," Lucas recited, reading from a paper on his lap. He sounded like a hostage reading a ransom note. Then it was Sophie's turn. She looked smaller than I remembered. "Mrs. Hart," Nora said, "do you confirm that the funds from this credit line were used exclusively for Heartline Loft and Design? And do you agree to transfer the corresponding equity interest equal to the principal amount borrowed back to Evelyn Hart as a silent partner?" "Yes," Sophie whispered. "And I will change the administrative access for the business banking accounts to Evelyn's email address effective immediately." The notary nodded efficiently. "Thank you. I have unlocked the documents for signing. Please click the highlighted fields." I watched the screen. Lucas leaned forward, tapping on a tablet. Sophie did the same. A moment later, a cascade of notifications chimed on Nora's laptop. Ping, ping, ping. It was done. The sound was not loud, but in my mind, it sounded like the heavy steel bolt of a prison cell slamming shut. But this time, I was not the one inside. Within minutes, the confirmations rolled in. Frontier Federal sent an automated email stating the credit line in my name was closed, and the balance had been novated to a new account under Lucas Hart. Desert Horizon Capital sent a secure message confirming that my portfolio was now under a sole owner discretion lock, meaning no power of attorney could touch it without a court order. We ended the call. The screen went black, erasing my son's defeated face. Nora wasted no time. She slid a fresh document toward me. "This is the draft of your new will. The bulk of your assets, including the eventual sale of your current home, will go into the Hart Renewal Trust. Its charter is to provide legal aid and emergency funds for elderly women who have been victims of financial abuse." I looked at the clause regarding Lucas. He was left a bequest of $5,000, payable only upon my death and only if no further claims of fraud were ever filed against him. It was a token, a crumb. "So," Nora said, capping her pen, You have the equity. You have the clean credit report. You have the control. What is next? Do we cut contact? Do we file the police report anyway? Or do you just want to rest? I looked at the blank screen where my son had been. There is one more thing I have to do. One more email. That evening, the phone rang. It was Lucas. It is done. Mom? He said. He sounded exhausted, stripped of all the arrogance he'd worn when he told me he forgot to mention the move. We signed everything. She is a wreck about the equity. But we did it. I know, I said. So? Are you going to tell anyone? He asked, his voice dropping to a murmur. I mean, Aunt Sarah. Or the people at the old church. They do not need to know about the misunderstanding. Right. He was terrified. He had saved his freedom, but now he wanted to save his reputation. He wanted to control the story. That depends on what you do next. Lucas? I said simply. I hung up and sat down at my computer. He thought the silence was part of the deal. He thought he could spin a story to our relatives about how he was helping his mum out, or how mum got confused. He wanted to own the narrative. I opened a new draft. I realized that regaining my money was only half the victory. If I let him lie about what happened, I was still protecting him at my own expense. I had to take the final weapon out of his hands. I had to tell the truth. I sat at the kitchen table, the light from the monitor cutting through the darkness of the room. It was time to draw the final line. Lucas believed that by signing the papers, he had bought my silence. He thought he could go to Maple Ridge, spin a tale about his crazy, overbearing mother, and keep his reputation intact while I sat here alone with the truth. He was wrong. I opened my contact list. I added my cousins in Ohio. I added the old neighbors who had known Lucas since he was in diapers. I added Pastor Mike from the church Thomas and I had attended for 30 years. Then, with a steady hand, I added the general inquiry email address for the real estate firm in Maple Ridge, where Lucas had just started his new job. I did not send it to his boss directly, but I knew how offices worked. Receptionists talk, emails get forwarded. I took a sip of cold tea and began to type. The words did not come from a place of rage. They came from a place of absolute, cold clarity to my family and friends. I wrote, I am writing this to clear up some confusion regarding my recent financial separation from my son, Lucas, and his wife, Sophie. Recently, it was brought to my attention that a line of credit totaling $80,000 was opened in my name without my consent. These funds were used to finance Sophie's business, Heartline Loft and Design. I paused, reading the sentence. It was factual. It was undeniable. I have worked with my legal counsel and the fraud department at Frontier Federal to resolve this matter. I continued. Lucas has now signed a legal admission of liability and has formally assumed the debt into his own name to prevent criminal charges. I am sharing this not to shame my son, but to protect my own credit and reputation. From this day forward, please understand that I am not a guarantor, co-signer, or financial backer for any of Lucas or Sophie's endeavors. If they approach you for financial assistance using my name or implying my support, please know that is not the case. I took a breath. Now for the part that would hurt the most. To my son. Lucas, I typed, knowing everyone else would read this too. Being betrayed by the child I raised is a wound that will never fully heal. I still love you, and I hope one day you become the man your father believed you could be. But until then, I must love you from a distance that is safe for me. I scrolled down to the final paragraph. Furthermore, I have restructured my estate. My assets will no longer pass to my children. Instead, I have established the Heart Renewal Trust. My savings will go toward helping elderly women secure legal representation against familial financial abuse. I would rather my money go to strangers who need protection than to family who exploit it. I added the final seal. I will not be replying to emails or calls regarding this matter. This is my only statement. I am choosing to live the rest of my life in peace. I read it one last time. It was sharp, clean, and devastating. It stripped away every lie they could possibly tell. I moved the cursor to the send button. Goodbye. The old Evelyn. I whispered. I clicked. The message sent. For a fleeting second, the screen was still. Then, almost instantly, the notifications began to pop up. A reply from cousin Sarah Evelyn. Is this true? A message from a friend. Oh my God, I cannot believe he did that. I did not open them. I reached out and held the power button on my phone until the screen went black. I unplugged the landline. Miles away, in Maple Ridge. I knew exactly what was happening. I could imagine Lucas's phone lighting up in his hand. I could imagine the notifications pinging on Sophie's watch. I could picture the questions flooding in from their friends, their church group, and perhaps even Lucas's new colleagues who monitored the general inbox. Did you really steal from your mother? Is this why you moved? They were drowning in the truth I had just poured over them. I walked out onto the front porch and sat in my rocking chair. The night air of Sunvale was cool and dry. Across the street, I could hear the faint cheer of a football game coming from the neighbour's open window. The world kept turning. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not happiness. It was lighter than that. It was the absence of weight. For years, I had carried their secrets, their debts, and their excuses. Now, the weight was exactly where it belonged on their shoulders. I rocked back and forth slowly. They would have to explain it now. They would have to come up with the excuses. They would have to face the whispers. It is your turn now. Lucas, I said to the quiet street. Handle it. 3 days after the email went out, a car skidded into my gravel driveway. I did not need to look out the window to know who it was. The engine cut off abruptly, followed by the heavy slam of a door and frantic footsteps pounding up the walkway. Mom, open the door. We need to talk. I stood behind the lace curtain of the living room window, watching him. Lucas looked nothing like the polished young professional who had smirked through the phone earlier that week. His hair was matted, his shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were sunken deep into his skull. He was 33 years old. I tried to find the little boy who used to cling to my leg at the basketball court, but I could not see him. I saw a stranger holding a phone, checking it nervously every few seconds to see if his boss or his ex-wife's family had called back. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, but I did not step aside to let him in. I stood in the threshold, blocking the entrance. The New Mexico sun was blindingly bright, casting harsh shadows across his face. Mom, he breathed out, his voice cracking. Do you have any idea what you did? That email? It went everywhere. My boss saw a forwarded copy. I am on administrative suspension pending an investigation. Aunt Sarah blocked my number. Sophie is at the hotel screaming her head off because her investors are pulling out. She says you ruined us. He waved his arms, vibrating with a mix of exhaustion and indignation. He was waiting for me to panic. He was waiting for me to rush to the phone and fix it for him. I waited until he ran out of breath. The silence stretched between us, heavy and hot. "Lucas," I said quietly, "in everything you just said, was there a single part where you were actually sorry for using my name to borrow money and moving states without telling me?" He froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his shoes. The defiance drained out of him like water from a cracked jar. He started, then stopped. Tears began to well up in his eyes, spilling over onto his unshaven cheeks. "I am sorry, Mum. I am. I really am." It was the first time he had said it without adding a but or an excuse about the market or Sophie's business. It was raw. But as I looked at him, I realized something painful. The apology had arrived, but the damage was already a permanent structure in our landscape. "I believe you," I said. "But I did not write that email to punish you. Lucas, I wrote it to protect myself. I wrote it to stop you from using my name to live a life you do not have the courage to pay for yourself. But they all hate me," he whispered, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "My reputation is gone. Can't you? Can't you send another email, say it was a mistake?" "No," I said firmly. "I cannot give you your honor back. That is something you have to earn. If you want people to trust you again, you have to show them you are trustworthy, not by hiding behind me, but by standing on your own." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I looked past him at the dry hills of Sunvale. "I do not know." I answered honestly. "Forgiveness is not a button I can just press. Lucas, it is a long road. And right now, all I know is that I am no longer allowing anyone, not even you, to touch my peace of mind or my financial security ever again." He slumped against the doorframe, defeated. I stepped back, leaving the door open. But the invitation was different now. "You can come in, you can drink a glass of water, and then tomorrow morning, you will drive back to your state. From now on, if you want to reach me, you send a text. I will answer when I feel like answering because I want to, not because I feel guilty." He nodded slowly, stepping across the threshold like a guest in a house he used to own. That night, after Lucas had retreated to the guest room, I sat at my old computer. The house was quiet. I opened a blank email draft. I typed the date. Then I typed a few sentences. Not to Lucas, not to Sophie, but to myself. I wrote about the day my son called to say he forgot to tell me he moved. I wrote about the moment I decided to stop being a victim. I read the words on the screen. There was no anger left, just a quiet, steel-like resolve. They could hurt me. Yes. But they could never again write my story for me. I smiled, saved the draft, and shut down the computer. The screen faded to black, but for the first time in a long time, I saw my own reflection clearly. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Evelyn's decision. Did she go too far? Or did she do exactly what she had to do? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so more people can hear these stories. See you in the next video.